sometimes they say, fate is really magical. In this case, it was, for sure.
We spent some time recently with our friends Irina Kaplan Lande and Bryan Young from the Poulenc trio. We recently collaborated with these musicians on a stop-motion short to accompany Trains of Thought, a piece they commissioned from a young composer named Viet Quang. We were fortunate to have the opportunity last spring to premiere that piece at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Collaboration is an important element in the work of the trio, and it begins with the trio musicians themselves.
It was, I remember the first day very well. It was one Friday afternoon. I was teaching at Peabody, and I had a cancellation. So I was I stepped out of my studio, and there was a faculty recital going on. So I peeked into the hall, and I heard a bassoon playing. But it was so unusual for a bassoon. It was such an, beautiful playing and so expressive, and it sounded to me like a cello. So I stayed for the whole concert, and then I came up to Bryan afterwards, and the rest is the history.
Right. And for me, getting to that place was interesting. I had actually taken a break from the bassoon for a few years. I was coming back to it. I had been married, and my wife got sick and then went through a long illness, and so I took a break to help her. And so that moment was sort of me coming back to the bassoon after a long pause, rehearsing for a competition. And so sometimes they say, fate is really magical. In this case, it was, for sure.
I don't remember what you played. I think it was Webern?
Yeah, Weber.
Webern, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you won that competition, actually. Yeah. That was a very successful time all over.
And I think the interesting thing about an oboe, a bassoon, and piano is that we have some similar possibilities for string trios, the more traditional trios for the group. But we also, because the instruments are, the oboe and bassoon are related by the double reed, and they are such old instruments, you get a sense of togetherness that you don't always get with other instruments. And so our repertoire possibilities are broader than I think a lot of people would expect, which is why we do a lot of commissioning and things like Trains of Thought, where we work with a composer to really explore the possibilities of what it is that we can do.
I think we both like change. Change is good.
Yes.
So going from one thing to another, you can get a little too much doing just one thing. And then, I love going from, practicing to teaching, or to presenting, to working with other artists. So it feeds itself.
And I think that's right. I think that's where a lot of our drive to do collaborations comes from, where, we're doing the things that we do, but we appreciate the things that other artists do. For instance, with Trains of Thought, where we can have a composer come in and do his wonderful work, and then we can work with another artist who hears it maybe similarly, maybe differently from us, and then creates this whole other beautiful thing. And I think that's one of the great things about art too, is that people can put themselves into something and then create this whole other thing.
It enriches our experiences, it enriches our lives, of course, and this is something that we've been very committed to, doing this collaborative project.
Both Bryan and Irina grew up in capital cities, Bryan in Washington, D.C., and Irina in St. Petersburg, Russia. They were both exposed as kids to great works of art, from the Dutch masters through the present. There's power in visual art to move people, and the influence of one form of art on another affects both of them deeply.
So I saw a play on the Broadway, Red, about this artist Mark Rothko, and it was, you know, it opened the whole world for me. It was so interesting. I started kind of looking out for his paintings. So there's a whole room at the Phillips collection, and you know, some months later I found myself sitting in that room surrounded by his paintings, and it was a very inspirational experience. So that's
one of the things that I respond to in lots of artwork is not just the sort of the aesthetic, but also the work ethic. I get moved sometimes by Picasso, not just because of the sort of the power of the work, but also the consistency over many years of producing, you know, day after day after day, and producing at a high quality. And so
the discipline.
And so those even outside of the aesthetic part, the sort of the workmanlike aspect of it helps. Same with Trains of Thought, where you know, I think the art is amazing, the story, the sort of the visual narrative is amazing, but the level of effort that it took to make something like that go is just staggering.
The trio is committed to presenting new works by living composers, and they've put together several unique collaborations with both visual artists and poets.
So we have a few projects that we've done with artists. It's a set of short, kind of almost like Baroque dances and Baroque pieces. So to me they sounded very poetic. Some of them are very lyrical, others are more energetic or playful, but that poetic feeling somehow just really was very present there. And at the time, a friend of ours and a wonderful, wonderful poet, Leah Purpura, was preparing to release her book of short poems, It Shouldn't Be Beautiful. And we thought, like, what a perfect opportunity to kind of enrich this piece, this music by her poetry. So we invited her on certain musical ideas. And at the end of this project, we actually recorded this piece with her reading poetry on the CD. And it's really beautifully paired. I think it's just perfectly paired music.
Well, we had a composer come in and do a piece called Yiddish Lexicon. And, you know, going back to the fact that we very often like to do music that has, that explores some sort of the ethnic background and you know, parts of our heritage. Yiddish Lexicon was fun because it took 10 Yiddish words, meshugana, shiksa, things like that, and set each one of these words to a piece of music, so a 10-movement piece. And very descriptive music, very visually oriented music. And so we thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we found some folks to actually illustrate each of these ideas, each of these themes in the music, and so
or symbols,
or the symbolism, yes, that kind of thing. And so we worked with Micah, with the School of Art in Maryland, to have a class of illustration students come in and do an illustration for each one of these movements. And so at the end result of that, we have this collection of 30 or so wonderful paintings and drawings that match with the music. That's I think what we really love to do, because the collaboration, at the end of it, we've learned something. We've worked with people to have their creativity, enhance ours.
So, and our biggest project up until this point was Trains of Thought. So this is how it started. I went to a concert where some new music was played by Peabody composers. And there were maybe 4 or 5 composers who presented their works. And this young composer named Viet Cong, his piece stood out and was really, noticed right away how talented he is. So we approached this young composer when he's still at Peabody and asked him to write a piece for us. So some months later, a score came in. The name of that score was Trains of Thought. And we started playing it, and for some reason, I kept seeing images, and all of them were like animated. And I remember I told Bryan, I feel like it needs somebody who would do this animation with us. So that's how we approached Elizabeth and Alden, and that's how the project began. That's what I felt like right away.
We have an album coming out in February, and it's called Trains of Thought. We've named it after the Viet Cong piece that we all worked together on, and I think it's going to be a really great album. We've got not just Trains of Thought, but also the Francais Trio, which is one of the kind of workhorses for our group of instruments. We've got 2 pieces by Shostakovich, The Romance and the Spin Around Moscow.
The original, they arranged especially for the trio.
We've got a fantasy by Rossini, The Semiramide, which is really virtuosic and fun. So we're looking forward to this coming out.
Yeah, a lot of variety of music in that. And on the cover is the work of Elizabeth and Alden.
Yeah. We're going to have your beautiful artworks, and like I was saying before, it's great to have a physical artifact, something that says, this represents this. This was created for this project, and something that will just always live as a memory to the things that we've done. It's just beautiful.